Thank you, everybody, for coming. Welcome to the American Enterprise Institute. I'm Tim Carney. I'm a visiting fellow here, as well as a senior political columnist at the Examiner. What I do here is the two programs I'm involved with are called, one is called The Culture of Competition, where we talk about competition, we talk about things like subsidies and crony capitalism and when competition yields good fruits and when the pursuit of profit might not yield good fruits. The other thing I work on is called the Program on Human Flourishing, where we talk about happiness. And both of those topics are addressed in our book we'll be discussing today, which is The Upside of Down, Why Failing Well is the Key to Success. Here to talk about this, we have the author, McArdle. Megan is an economics writer at Bloomberg. She's written at The Atlantic, The Economist, Newsweek, in addition to writing this, her first book. Our respondent is Tyler Cowen from George Mason University and the Mercatus Center. You might know him from his blog, Marginal Revolution, and his recent books, A Great Stagnation and Average is Over. A couple quick comments about the program here before we begin. First, if you've got a cell phone, just turn it off. Feel free, if you want to do Twittering stuff about this, to do that too. Just we don't want phones ringing during this. There will be time for audience questions, but it won't be a formal question and answer. We'll intersperse it, and we're going to have something of a conversation here. So if you have a question, try to spend some time thinking of how to make it as concise as possible. Because we're going to break up at about 6:30 for wine and cheese, and we're selling copies of the book outside. Megan will sign them. If you like what you hear, recommend you buy them. I'm very much in favor of people buying books that they find interesting. This is a very important economic activity.
Me too.
Yes. So, again, thank you for coming. Megan, I read the book. I love the book. I thought there was a dozen interesting things in here. More than that, stories from all sorts of things, ranging from bad dates you had to failed companies to drug addicts. My favorite line that I think I can remember off the top of my head was, if you don't already have trouble with delayed gratification, the best way to get there is to develop a drug habit. I'm probably misquoting it, but
no, that's about right.
No end of interesting stories in the book. But for this crowd here, we've got a Washington crowd. What do you think is the most interesting thing you came across while writing it, or the most interesting thing they will come across while reading it?
So I think we all know that failure is a learning opportunity, and that often we learn things by failing. Starting with the way we learn to walk, which is mostly a tale of tripping and plummeting and getting up and going over, all the way up to how the economy learns, right? Most products fail, most companies fail. Even a successful entrepreneur who has done this before has a 7 out of 10 chance of failing the next time he tries to start a company. So the most interesting thing that I actually learned was how amenable kind of bad failure attitudes are to change. And I learned this in my own way. There's, as a writer, I have what psychologists call a fixed mindset, which is basically there's two ways that you can approach a challenge. You can approach it as an opportunity to learn something and expand your brain, or you can approach it as a dipstick that is measuring your innate level of talent and ability. Most writers are the latter kind of person. They call that a fixed person, a fixed mindset. Growth mindset people tend to do better. They tend to take on more challenges. They tend to learn more from the challenges that they do face. They do it again, they develop more skills, and they grow more. But it's a hard mentality to develop, especially you look at the way most kind of bright kids go through school. It's easy, right? And you learn from that success is about finding work easy. And then when you get to the big leagues, that's no longer true. You're competing with all the people who found it easy. And you have to have the grit and resilience to first take on things where you really might fail, and second of all, to learn from them. So I was talking to Carol Dweck, who's the psychologist who came up with this distinction through her research. And I said, at the end of the interview, I felt like I kind of had to confess. I said, I feel like a fraud because I'm a total fixed mindset person. I totally feel like every time I take on a challenge, this is a measure of me as a person, and if I fail, that just means that I never had what it took. And she said, oh, me too. It's actually pretty common among academics. And she said, but I changed. I changed, and I knew I had changed when I heard myself saying, wow, I suck at this. This is really fun. And I thought, wow, I'm never going to get there. I don't like doing things I'm bad at. I never have. And then over the course of writing the book, I did. I really actually changed. And it wasn't because, a lot of these books end up being 12 steps to help yourself through failure, and that's not really what this book is. But the interesting thing is that it wasn't a 12-step program. It was actually just reminding myself of the truth, which is that when we take on things we don't know how to do, you think about how you learned to play tennis. You didn't sit down and develop an elaborate theory of tennis physics. If that were the way to get good at tennis, then every year Wimbledon would be won by some guy with glasses from MIT, right? That is not actually the case. You learn to play tennis by hitting a ball and it doesn't go where you think it will. And it doesn't go where you think it will for the first 10 or 20 or 100 times, and then eventually, basically by accident, you hit it in the right direction. But your brain makes a little connection there, and you say, oh, right, that's how it feels. You don't know quite what you did, though, so usually the next time you hit it, it doesn't go where you... But over time, you develop that talent for finding the few things that work out of the many, many, many wrong ways to hit a tennis ball. And so developing that ability to embrace that isn't a matter of having a 12-step program. It's just a matter of reminding yourself that this is true. And when you face something, saying to yourself, you know what, I might not be very good at this. Probably I won't, I haven't done it before. But I can get better. And the way I'm going to get better is by doing it and not being very good at it. And similarly with things like unemployment, with things like what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error, where you tend to attribute things that happen to the agency of some person. This person, when someone's mean to you in the supermarket, you usually think, wow, that's a terrible, mean person. You don't think, wow, she probably had a bad day and maybe her mother's sick. Just reminding yourself that usually it's because her mother's sick. Most people do not just randomly wander around snarling at everyone they meet. Really does change how you interact with those people. And so that was actually the most surprising thing that I learned, was that it's easy to describe the ways in which it's hard to fail, but I was kind of surprised at how easy it is to, merely by describing them, get better at doing it.
Tyler, you have ideas and thoughts and opinions on nearly every subject, whether it's Thai food in suburban strip malls, or the unemployment rate, or whether inflation is in fact everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. So when you read Megan's book or listened to what she was saying now, what was the thing that struck you as most interesting?
This book, first of all, this is a great book, and you should all go out and buy 9 copies of it. And we could be calling it the upside of up. I learned from this book we should teach young children to play chess at a very early age, because you cannot be good at chess right away, so you have to learn failure. And furthermore, your failure is rather brutally measured, and you see everyone around you failing, and you know exactly how bad you are. But you also have a way of learning how to do better, and you can measure your progress. And this is one of the most important skills to teach people early on, is how to fail. And we need to think about this more in educational terms. So when I think of failure and how to move towards success, I think immediately of issues concerning children. So say that one had a child, and you're asking yourself, what can you do to make this child learn the lessons of this book? To me, that's really the big question coming out of this book. To some extent, we've learned these lessons as a nation. I'm afraid we're going to forget them. I'm afraid we're headed toward a future where there's so little privacy and so much measurement, maybe eventually genetic measurement, that we will lose a lot of the upside of down and become a society where second chances are more difficult. I'm also intrigued by the idea that there are some areas where failure is really good for you and other areas where failure is completely disastrous. So some of you may have read Megan's recent blog post on Mt. Gox, the Bitcoin conduit, which has just completely gone poof, and the money is gone. It's what, 13% of all Bitcoin in circulation? Is that the number?
I don't know what the exact number is, but it is a large percentage.
It's a large percentage. Now, Megan predicts that Mt. Gox going poof will eventually spell the end or a dramatic decline of Bitcoin. So we don't say, well, Gox went poof, so Bitcoin is going to learn something. There's a fixed architecture to Bitcoin, and you have properties of increasing return systems based on liquidity and common focal points. So there you have a case where both the architecture and the increasing returns to scale means that